Welcome, I'm Dr. Cervigni, Chief Scientific Officer at Fondazione Walter Longo, and with this video I'm going to introduce you to the longevity diet, meaning how to reach a healthy longevity and how a sustainable diet and a correct lifestyle can help improving our world. Understanding what aging is an important first step in understanding which strategies are most likely to slow it down without causing other problems. The term aging indicates the changes that occur with the passage of time in living organisms and as well as inanimate objects. These changes are not necessarily negative. In fact, although humans and most living beings manifest dysfunction in old age, there are cases in which aging leads to improvements. For example, the winners of the New York Marathon are usually in their 30s, and many of the top finishers in their 40s. It can be deduced that in the human body, taken as a whole, there are positive physical and mental changes that occur and make a 35-year-old more suitable to engage in that type of thought competition than someone who is 15 years younger. Instead of aging, we could also use the term senescence, which better describes the process of aging by losing functionality and therefore excludes the improvements mentioned above. The theory of programmed longevity is central in this sense, because it argues that understanding how and why we age is not as important as understanding how to stay young. So the viventology is the study of youth. When you try to understand why a car gets old, you can examine its engine and conclude that over time it oxidizes, and therefore to make it last longer, antioxidants must be added to the fuel or engine oil, for example. However, if your goal is to make an engine run smoothly for much longer, you could design it in such a way that it gets damaged more slowly but also periodically rebuilds itself, or that parts can be replaced periodically. Our body's engine ages, but if it is programmed to last longer, it will put in place protection, repair, and replacement mechanism to maintain itself young and functional. If you think about most non-communicable diseases such as diabetes, cardiovascular disease, neurodegenerative diseases, and cancer, they are more common as people age, because aging is a catalyst for chronic diseases. For this reason, instead of acting individually on individual diseases, intervention on how to get and age well can optimize our health. To keep an organism young, we must act on its longevity program. However, if the molecular mechanisms of longevity are not known, it becomes almost impossible to reprogram an organism to live longer. Just as it's almost impossible to make a program on your computer more effective without being an electronic engineer with a deep knowledge of programming language. To understand aging in humans, scientists began by identifying the gene that regulates aging in simple organisms and then returned to mice and humans. The first step was to identify a new scientific approach, a method called chronological life of yeast. So it was developed, which made it possible to identify the genes that played a leading role in aging. Thanks to simplicity of the organism and the advanced genetic, cellular, and molecular technologies available for yeast, two important discoveries were made in just 1 year. The first one, if hungry, moving them from a liquid rich in sugars and other nutrients to water alone, the yeast lived twice as long. And the second discovery was that sugar was the nutrient that made them age faster and die, activating the RAS and PKA genes and inactivating factors and enzymes that protected yeast from oxidation. In short time, not only the first genes that regulates the aging process was identified, but the entire metabolic pathway. In the years to come, studies follow which identified aging genes activated by amino acids and proteins, for example TOR-S6K. In the following years, those data were experimentally confirmed on mice. By studying a group of people with dwarfism who live in Ecuador and who lack the growth hormone receptor, it was then proven that the same genes and metabolic pathways also protect humans from diseases related to aging. The research in Ecuador began in 2006, and in 2011 the most important study on them was published, which showed the onset of a very low rate of cancer and diabetes in these individuals, despite a diet and lifestyle very bad. This study was the first real demonstration of Professor Longo's theory of aging conservation, in which he proposed that similar or identical genes control aging in simple organisms such as yeast and in more complex ones, including humans. This study was the first real demonstration of this theory, and most, if not all, organisms age similarly, and genes and molecular strategies to extend life must be analogous, if not identical. A risk factor, such as excess cholesterol or obesity, for example, is defined as something that can affect the probability of contracting a certain disease or dying. It has been shown that obesity is a risk factor for diabetes because it can raise the chance of developing it by as much as 5 times. Although we think that poor nutrition, a sedentary lifestyle, or the genetic makeup inherited from our parents are more important risk factors, it is proven that the major risk factor in contracting diseases such as cancer, cardiovascular disorders, Alzheimer's disease, and many others is aging. According to recent data, the probability that a 20-year-old woman will get breast cancer in the next 10 years is 1 in 2,000. This number rises to 1 in 24 for a 70-year-old woman, and therefore increases by nearly 100 times. Therefore, given that age is the main risk factor in contracting all the most serious diseases, intervening on aging is much better than trying to prevent and treat all the main diseases individually. We can therefore influence the possibility of the development of many diseases by acting on the longevity program. And now we know that we can do this by orchestrating the main regulators of this program through nutrition. As those who work in the medical field well know, to optimize the prevention and treatment of diseases, it is necessary to know the causes found at a molecular and cellular level, and to understand how to restore the full, correct, and healthy functioning of molecular and cells. Trying to cure a disease without having this knowledge is like trying to fix a car without knowing how the engine or electrical system works. But with one huge difference, because repairing a car or plane is relatively simple, since we build the cars and planes and therefore we know exactly how they work, while we did not build the human body, and we are still a long way from understanding exactly how it works. We can therefore influence the possibility of the development of many diseases by acting on the longevity program, and now we know that we can do this by orchestrating the main regulators of this program through nutrition. The image here shows how sugar, protein, and amino acids influence genes and metabolic pathways and are now largely accepted as aging accelerators, TOR-S6K, growth hormone and IGF-1 and PKA. In order to reprogram and maximize longevity in the human body, we need to continue studying how different dietary plans control these genes and subsequently the longevity program and all pathologies associated with aging. With the knowledge introduced here, can we now answer this question? Can we control how we age? If we consider the main risk factors like diet, lifestyle, physical activity and DNA, and considering DNA is not modifiable, it is easy to understand that we probably have the power to control around 70% of this process, acting on our everyday choices. So, what is the longevity secret for the centenarians? I would like to mention now some examples of successful healthy centenarians. For example, Gertrude Baines from Los Angeles has lived until the age of 115, and in 2009 she was the oldest woman in the world. She said that her secret was to have led a regular life, as testified by her motto, never drunk or fool around. Salvatore Caruso from Calabria, Italy, a region of the southern of Italy, lived until the age of 110 and had a clear mind right until the end. You can see him here singing a song from his childhood together with Professor Longo, who is playing the guitar. His motto, no wine, no tobacco, no women, didn't make him very popular around town. However, as with most centenarians, the stories they tell can be very different from the facts. As it happens, Salvatore was married with children and liked to drink wine regularly. Emma Morano lived until the age of 117, and in 2017 she was the oldest person in the world. She was from northern Italy, and her interviews are very famous because she declared she ate eggs and meat almost every day. This statement has led many people to believe this was the secret to healthy longevity, but actually it's not the case, as she had this kind of diet only after the age of 80, which is correct, as aging leads to lose lean body mass, and he needs to be counteracted by an increasing intake of proteins. A completely different example is given here by Jean-Louise Carmont, a French lady who reached 122, and today she is the person who lived longest. Her statement was very funny and different from the rest, and she drank wine all her life and smoked until 117, quitting smoking only because of the trembling. We can speculate that she had very good genes who helped her to live so long despite her lifestyle. As you can see, everyone has his or her personal secret to reach the age of 100 and more. Then, what's the approach all of us can take from them? Let's talk about longevity. The word longevity is used to indicate life expectancy in demography. However, the term longevity sometimes means to refer only to especially long-lived members of a population. As you can tell, there are many factors that define longevity: our lifestyle, physical activity, our DNA, and of course, eating could be one key contributing factor. Let's see which is the ideal diet for longevity. When it comes to eating, there are a multitude of iterations on how we can eat. However, there may be a simple strategy to determining how we should be eating in order to help promote our longevity. This path is called the pillars of healthy longevity. You see the 5 pillars here being the first, basic research. Based on preclinical work, it does not appear that there are some nutrients and kind of fasting that are major components of longevity, because they are able to limit the activity of pro-aging pathways. Basic research. Based on preclinical work, it thus appears that there are some nutrients and kind of fasting that are a major components of longevity, because they are able to limit the activity of pro-aging pathways. Going forward, we can look to what we observe in everyday life as it relates to longevity with epidemiological research, which is our pillar number 2. Our third pillar is what is called the gold standard. Clinical studies allow the comparison between a control group of people and a group with an intervention in the diets to see the effects of this intervention. We can also look to what we observe in regions where people live longest and among the centenarians. For instance, we can look into the famous blue zones, Okinawa, the Japanese island where people are believed to be some of the longest living humans in the world. Observing their diets and their habits, we can try to copy them in order to live longer. Our fifth pillar is more abstract, but very useful as it can complement the others by providing reference points and useful analogies. All these pillars can be merged together from the basic science perspective to what we see in everyday life to create the ideal longevity diet. Across the world, there are some areas known for having a very long-lived population. The most famous are the blue zones, where the term is used to identify geographical areas where life expectancy is higher than the global average and in which there continues to be a percentage of the population that reaches centenary age. Blue zones are important for research as they provide interesting case studies regarding the impact of specific dietary habits and lifestyles on the population's longevity. The concept of blue zones was first introduced in 2004 in the magazine Experimental Gerontology in a demographic study conducted by Gianni Pes and Michael Pullen. The two researchers identified the city of Nuoro in Sardinia as the region with the highest concentration of male centenarians. Dan Buettner, New York Times journalist, identified two other blue zones, Okinawa in Japan and Loma Linda in California. The term blue zones appear on National Geographic in an article written by Buettner and consequently spread worldwide, because during his research, Buettner collaborated with Pullen. The blue zones identified by Buettner and Pullen are now 5 and are distributed across the globe. Buettner and many other scientists, such as Walter Longo, that have dedicated themselves to studying the centenarians living in these areas, have highlighted how in these places it is possible to live a longer and a healthier life by following a lifestyle based on a few important rules. Here are the most recurrent: a semi-vegetarian diet consuming legumes and large quantities of complex carbohydrates, lots of nuts, some fish, little protein, little sugar, few saturated and trans fats. The common habit of eating a maximum of 2-3 times a day, with a light meal in the evening, often eaten before dark. The common tendency to consume a limited variety of local foods, even though in some cases centenarians have been known to follow more varied diets. For example, in the past, the inhabitants of Okinawa would obtain most of their calories from purple sweet potatoes, which this is less common now. A moderate consumption of calories and alcoholic drinks and little to no smoking. Consistent and measured physical activity. Alongside important variables such as genetic factors, diet, physical activity and lifestyle, after having listened to many stories, often very different one from another, told by centenarians from all over the world, Professor Longo notes a common denominator: the sense of purpose in life, the will to live, and having little stress, the idea of family being central to one's existence, feeling socially useful, having a full and fulfilling social and spiritual life, and most of all, the feeling of having a purpose in life. So what are the blue zones? The Greek island of Icaria in the central eastern Aegean Sea, the Seventh-day Adventist Christian community in Loma Linda in California, the peninsula of Nicoya on the Pacific coast of Costa Rica, the eastern coast of Sardinia in the Olgiastra area in Italy, Okinawa, the largest island of the Japanese Ryukyu archipelago in southern Japan. The longevity diet was developed by Professor Longo after several decades of research into longevity and the mechanism activated by either eating or not eating. The longevity diet can be defined as a pescatarian diet, as it is mainly plant-based with some small portion of fatty fishes twice or 3 times a week. So it is rich in legumes, vegetables and healthy fats with the right amount of essential nutrients such as omega-3, which can be possibly supplemented when needed. Moreover, this specific dietary composition is combined with a regular fasting regimen and includes time-restricted eating during the day. When overweight or obese, a person can decide to have just 2 meals and 1 light snack during the day, instead of having 5 regular meals. Of course, each person is unique, and so there is no one-size-fits-all diet, but we can use this framework to start achieving healthier lives. When we come to the main nutrients, we can see that, of course, all of them are included in the longevity diet, with some attention to their quality and quantity. Carbohydrates should be complex and rich in fibers like the one we can find in vegetables, legumes and whole grains. Fats should be abundant but mainly healthy, as the one found in olive oil, nuts and fish. Proteins derive mainly from fish and legumes, and the amount should be based on age, more during childhood and seniority and less during adulthood. Shifting our focus onto lifestyle, the longevity diet suggests to observe a 10-12 hours time-restricted eating and 12-14 hours of fasting, because this may help to support weight loss or maintain the right weight. To avoid eating 3 to 4 hours before sleeping to help digestion. To be active. To incorporate foods that were common within your ancestry, as this may pose the lowest chance of intolerance. If the food is not common to your ancestry, then try to avoid or focus on eating it just occasionally. Keep weight and waist circumference in check to reduce risk factors for diseases. We also have a comparison of our longevity diet with the planetary diet, because they have many features in common, because both of them are based on clinical studies, observational studies, meta-analysis and the importance of the planet. Here in this table you can see some differences and are mainly focused on the consumption of red meat, which is not included in the longevity diet, such as white meat and dairies. But you can see there are many other common foods like fish, nuts, legumes, cereal, especially if whole grains, potatoes, some fruits, a lot of vegetables, and reduced sugars and saturated fats. In 2018, I had the honor of participating in a conference in which there were Professor Longo and Professor Suzuki, a cardiologist from Okinawa, one of the most famous blue zones that we have just seen. Based on this experience with Centenarians, Professor Suzuki reported that the most important factors for longevity are a healthy diet, regular physical activity, and attention to relationship with others. Professor Suzuki also spoke about an additional factor which is fundamental for healthy and happy longevity. It is called in Japanese ikigai, and it is not easily translated into other languages, but it can be considered as having a purpose in life. This is what brings you to joy and inspires you to get out of bed every day. until 100 years of age and more. Professor Suzuki showed this old lady aged 102 and called Kamada. Her ikigai was to embrace her great-great-grandchild, and, as you can see from this picture, she got it. I thank you for your attention and hope you have enjoyed this video about the longevity diet.